there's tighter financial constraints. They're getting rid of players left and right and taking on dead cap hits. Do you think Kyle and John are on the hot seat or no?
I think their seat is next to a microwave, and Jed could throw it can get hot really quick this year. Like, I don't think they're on the verge of being fired, but if they have a season similar to the season they had last year, they could be instantly. So I think they're okay right now. It's like maybe a little toasty, a little warm, but if they repeat last year, this year, I could see Kyle Shanahan being fired at the end of the season, but I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the hot seat is such a vague thing because, like, what is the hot seat? How do you measure it? How do you know? You don't. You can't. You don't. But I think it's different for different teams. If the Eagles, if Jeffrey Lurie owned this franchise and Howie Roseman were the general manager, I think, he would be on the hot seat. And one more bad season, you're out. I don't think they put up with that. 2 bad seasons, you're out because they've won Super Bowls with multiple head coaches. But on the Niners, Kyle is so powerful and expensive. And I don't know if they're as like hell bent on winning a Super Bowl as other organizations. Like, they want to be respected and profitable. But let's say if they fire John and Kyle, it's a very expensive move. I mean, that's a move that says, you know what, this is unacceptable, and we will settle for nothing less than a championship, and we're going to fire Kyle Shanahan and his $15 million a year guaranteed salary and whatever the hell John Lynch is making, and risk them not even working this year and having to pay them and a replacement who, if he's going to be one of the top guys, probably going to be $15 million a year too. We're going to spend all that cash because we care so much about football and being champions. Now, there are teams like that, and I love that about certain teams in the NFL. I just have never felt the Niners are one of those teams. And I think what they can do instead of firing John and Kyle is take their budget away. And that to me is a form of being on the hot seat. Once your bosses start saying, hey, there's a lot less money for you to use because we have a lot less confidence in you to make the right decisions, that's a bad sign. But again, firing John and Kyle would be such an expensive maneuver for the Yorks while they're trying to go get Scottish soccer team. I don't know if that's what they want to do right now.
Well, what you've been talking about for a long time is trading Kyle. Trading Kyle wouldn't cost them anything, right? Like, if they could trade him in his contract. So I do think it's a possibility. I think Kyle is also, I mean, we don't know this for sure, but from the outside and everything we're hearing, it appears that Kyle Shanahan is the main reason that the Yorks are now feeling this financial burden and the restraints and saying, hey, enough. That's Kyle's doing from what everyone is saying and what we're hearing. So he's the guy responsible for making Jed York feel like the way he's feeling right now, where he's like, hey, enough, guys. That's a Kyle thing, right? So it would not surprise me if Kyle doesn't make the playoffs this year. I would fully expect him to be traded. I really would. So I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat.
That's a good point.
But like, if he doesn't make the playoffs,
how you put it that way, because it's like, are they really going to keep spending $15 million a year? Allegedly, that's what he makes on a guy who's not making the playoffs. I mean, this is a team that wants to trim the fat financially, and he's a very expensive investment. And if he's not paying off anymore, I mean, he could go too.
He's also the reason why they have so much. He's also the reason they have so much fat, right? So it's not just. It's his contract, and it's all the contracts that Kyle wanted to hand out.
I mean, this is a team that's worth billions and billions of dollars. They'll be okay without Kyle Shanahan. They can still support themselves. And if he's no longer bringing them playoff appearances, then I do think they're on the hot seat, man. How else do you interpret your entire budget getting slashed? To me, it's almost like they said, you know what? Look, Kyle had an awful year. There's no two ways about it. Can't get around it. But, he was the GM. He was doing this. He was doing that. Why don't we take away all the financial decisions, take away the business aspect from him, let him focus on being a head coach, and then see what he does. If he is focusing on being a head coach and still misses the playoffs, then it's over. Because you can make the excuse now that he was spread too thin.
Yeah. Yeah. The results of this coming season are everything, right? Like if he makes the playoffs, he'll be around for a long time. But if he, continues to struggle like they did this last season, I would automatically assume that he's done.
Yeah. And again, around a long time, the guys who last 19, 20, 25 years are guys with rings. He hasn't had one yet. And so I would put him in the group of people who've made it this far with like Bill Cowher, Andy Reid. Andy Reid's first stint with the Eagles was like what, 13 years? Eventually,
Yeah.
even if you're really good, they'll say you got to go. And I think with Kyle, they'll either trade him or eventually, if he makes playoffs this year and doesn't win, they could just let the contract expire in a few years. Like, you know what? We're not going to fire you because that's kind of disrespectful. And you are a good coach and you would get hired right away, but we're not. We're going in another direction. Thank you very much.
I mean, that's what I wanted them to do prior, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't want them to extend Kyle. I didn't understand the point of extending Kyle when they did. They like let it play out before you commit to that. So a lot of the things that it seem like obvious to a lot of fans, like people like myself, the trenches, the Kyle extension, all of this stuff, it seemed obvious to a lot of us. And now it's like the 49ers are finally realizing it, which is interesting.
Anoop says, is it just me or do several of the college quarterbacks look more capable than Brock? Milroe, Dart, Howard, Gabriel, Tyler, Show. Howard had a bad day at the combine, but you know how I feel about Milroe. I just don't think Kyle will feel the same way at all.
I also think Quincy Avery made a good point too, in regards to the combine. Like the combine's one thing, and it is a big deal, but like, how do they play football? Like, what does it look like when they're playing football? Right,
Yeah.
like that's the real judge.
I went down there being like, man, I'm going to get so much out of this week, and I'm so proud that I'm going, and Kyle's lazy, and he should be there. By the time I left, I was like, I totally understand why Kyle doesn't come. I don't want to be here. I can't wait to leave. Now, he should still go. Like, when you go 6-11, you got to go just to, like, show your boss. He still should have went. But by the end, I was like, I completely get it. This is awful. This is freaking awful. Oh, my God. This is terrible. Imagine doing this every year. But I will. It's my job. The steak at the end of the night was nice. The Midwest corn-fed steak is something else, dude. And it's cheaper because everything out there is cheaper. I like that. But other than that, I mean, nothing.
I do find it interesting that Kyle didn't go, man. I think it's strange that he didn't go. Maybe they're like taking away his
3 coaches didn't go
on the roster.
4 coaches didn't go.
Which ones?
Kyle McVay, LaFleur, Kellen Moore. And with Kellen Moore, it's like, all right, you've been a coach for 3 minutes. Maybe you need to stay home. But the other 3, why? D'Amico went. Freaking McDaniel went. Tomlin went. Didn't talk to the media, but he talked to the players. Harbaugh went. Didn't talk to the media, but he talked to the players. I don't get it. It seems, I don't know. Maybe they're right. Now, you know what? I have no idea. That was so boring. Maybe they're right. I just feel like you're going to draft this player. You might want to know him. You're going to pick this guy. You've made some big mistakes on guys you didn't know. You didn't know Javon Kinlaw.
They do have the ability to bring in guys for meetings, so maybe that's where you get the opportunity. But it definitely is important to talk to players. So maybe they bring them in. Maybe they send John out there to figure out what players they want to bring in. They bring in, and then Kyle gets involved at that point. If that's the case, then that's fine. But you do need to talk and speak to a player face to face before you spend a top 11 pick on them.
Jose 510 says, do you believe there's any pressure from ownership to management based on the fact that we're hosting the Super Bowl for the second time in a decade? No, they're slashing costs. Slashing spending.
Yeah.
We're going to spend less this year.
You would think so.
They spent $334 million last year. They got 6 wins. They're not doing that again.
You would think this would be the year to do it, but no, it doesn't seem like that's the case.
And it's like they don't have the guts to fire Kyle Shanahan or to make a big move the way the Bartolos would have. But what they can do is take their spending away. And if they have another down season, then it's like, well, now you just made it easier for us to get the courage eventually to trade you. We don't quite have it yet. But if you keep losing because we keep not giving you the funds, then we might.